Patrick Hennessy, Sunday Telegraph. Prime Minister, could you say if President Obama has asked you, as reported, to provide 2,000 more troops from the UK permanently to reinforce our mission in Afghanistan, and what your response has been if that request has been made?
That's not correct. We've been discussing, first of all, the election campaign and the need for the best reinforcements that will make for a fair and free election. If we are going to sustain the democracy in Afghanistan that is necessary to fight off both the Taliban and the potential return of Al-Qaeda, then we need to ensure by our efforts that the elections can be carried out as fairly as possible. So our first discussions have been about that. The second area is longer-term strategy for Afghanistan, and we are discussing this with Americans on a continuous basis, as well as with our other allies. But I repeat, the numbers that we will announce to the House of Commons are the temporary numbers until the elections are over, possibly October.
Gentleman in the third row here.
Michael Evans of the Times. How could you not know? That's,
The gentleman is Michael Evans of the Times. What role do you actually envisage for these troops? I appreciate you're saying they're there to protect the elections, but are they going to be logistical, or are they going to be guys standing with their guns primed, guarding poll booths, or how do you envisage it?
Well, we've got to properly protect ourselves as well from the growing threat from roadside bombs, and that's what we'll be doing. And I'll be able to announce in more detail with David and John the specific tasks that we're engaged in on the election. But we will now be consulting with other allies about what they can also do to help. And we've had some very productive talks with other countries today about their contribution to the effort as a whole. So I think you'll see more detail emerging when we give a parliamentary statement. But we are clear, one, that we have got to do more for this election period. Two, that we've got to see a genuine burden sharing on the part of other countries. And three, of course, we've got to protect our troops, as we intend fully to do, against the most recent Taliban tactic of using roadside bombs that put the safety of our troops at risk, and the safety of our troops is paramount.
Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4.
I'm going to ask you guys.
Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News. Prime Minister, the Chief...
You're with BBC World News. We are the BBC's international news channel, bringing you our continuing coverage of the NATO 60th anniversary summit taking place split between three venues: Strasbourg, Kiel and Baden-Baden. Gordon Brown in the middle of your screen there. President Barack Obama's request for more troops in Afghanistan has been largely granted by NATO leaders. At their 60th anniversary summit in Strasbourg, EU leaders pledged thousands of extra troops and police to provide security during the country's forthcoming elections in August, but it's unclear how long those forces will stay. The US president hailed what he called the concrete commitments and said the alliance was united and strong.
Strasbourg and Kiel with concrete commitments on NATO support. Our allies and partners have already agreed to provide approximately 5,000 troops and trainers to advance our new strategy, as well as increased civilian assistance. To support critical elections for August 20th, NATO will fully resource our election support force to maximize security. And our allies have committed additional funds to an Afghan elections trust fund that will provide the necessary resources for free and fair elections. To accelerate and enhance our training of Afghan security forces, a new NATO mission, a new NATO training mission, will focus on high-level support for Afghan Army and training and mentoring for the Afghan police. And many of our allies and partners have also pledged support for a new trust fund to sustain Afghan national armies going forward. And to strengthen Afghan institutions and advance opportunity for the Afghan people, we are working with our NATO allies and partners to achieve substantial increases in non-military assistance and to provide the kind of doctors, engineers, educators, and agricultural specialists that are needed to make a difference on the ground.
Well, the other big development at the NATO summit was the naming of the Danish Prime Minister Anders Fogh Rasmussen as the next Secretary-General of NATO. Mr. Rasmussen, who's led a centre-right coalition in Denmark since 2001, will take over from Jaap de Hoop Scheffer in August of this year. His candidacy had been opposed by Turkey, which was unhappy with his handling of a row over Danish cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. But Turkey did not, in the end, veto Mr. Rasmussen's appointment. Well, outside the summit, an estimated 30,000 people took part in a demonstration attacking NATO's role in Afghanistan and Iraq. Despite 10,000 security police on hand, the protests did turn violent. Several buildings were set on fire in Strasbourg, including a hotel near the Rhine Bridge where NATO leaders had met earlier. Hundreds of masked protesters clashed with the police, who responded with water cannon, tear gas, flash bombs and rubber bullets. Live on the line now is our Europe correspondent Clive Myrie. Clive, where are you and what's been going on in the past couple of hours since you last updated us?
Well, we've just pulled out of the area now where the march has been taking place on the outskirts of Strasbourg, around about 2 miles away from where the NATO leaders are actually holding their summit. The demonstration, by and large, involving between, depending on who you talk to, 15 to 30,000 people, was peaceful. But on the fringes of that demonstration, there were violent clashes pretty much throughout the day. We watched from around about 9 o'clock this morning through to late afternoon as scores and scores of black-clad youths smashed up paving stones to make stones so that they can throw them at the police. Bottles were used, Molotov cocktails were thrown, bits of wood, anything to try and disrupt the police operation here. CRS officers from the elite French riot squad, police squad, responded with baton charges and tear gas. And we watched as a number of buildings were set on fire by the demonstrators. One multi-story hotel was pretty much destroyed in a blaze right next to an apartment block. A bank was set on fire, and a pharmacy, as well as a number of businesses, including a petrol station, being looted of water and beer. So throughout the day, it's been one of intense violence. A number of people have been arrested, and we understand that around a dozen people have been lightly injured.
Clive, have you had a chance to work out how many of these people were just hardcore troublemakers and how many of the other demonstrators were ordinary folks who just wanted to get a message out there?
It's difficult to give exact numbers. If we say that around 20 to 30,000 people were on the march, I would estimate around about 1,000 were intent on causing trouble. You'd see the same kind of faces at different flashpoints with the police, picking up rocks, throwing stones, throwing Molotov cocktails. The vast majority of the people out on the streets here today were law-abiding, and from a very wide cross-section of society, young and old, black and white, rich and poor, many of them angry with NATO, who they believe over the last 60 years has been a force for evil, not for good, around the world. And they would point particularly at the deaths of scores of civilians in the Afghanistan campaign. But you also had other campaigners here from communist groups, anarchist groups, environmentalists. We also had a group campaigning for a homeland for the Kurdish people in southern Turkey. So all kinds of people with a particular beef against society were here, using NATO as a platform in which to vent their grievances.
Clive Myrie, live in Strasbourg. Clive, thanks very much. If you want to make sense of what's been agreed at that NATO summit, you can do that via our website, bbc.com/news. You can get the very latest on what Barack Obama has announced in terms of troop numbers, troop deployment, and also this way that NATO ministers have agreed that they will put more money and resources into trainers, people who will train Afghan soldiers to improve security during the summer period in the run-up to the elections in Afghanistan in August. bbc.com/news. Moving on. Bombs exploded near a police post in the heart of Pakistan's capital, Islamabad. Police say gunshots were heard after the explosion and several people are reported to have been killed. Our correspondent, Barbara Plett, is in Islamabad. Barbara, what do we think happened here?
This looks very much like an attack on a security post. The explosion took place where several paramilitary soldiers have been positioned to guard a main road on which many embassies are located, and the road also leads towards Parliament as well as the presidency. A senior police official here at the site has told us that a suicide bomber blew himself up amongst the tents set up for these paramilitary soldiers. He's told us that 6 of the troops have been killed. and a number of them have been injured. After the explosion, there was quite a lot of gunfire, but we understand that that was the troops at the checkpost firing in the air, thinking that perhaps there was somebody else as well, part of the attack. But this is the second attack in Islamabad on a security post in the last 2 weeks, and the previous one was claimed by the Pakistani Taliban leader, Bait al-Masood.
So there's been no claim of responsibility to do with the events of today, not so far?
No. The Bait al-Masood had claimed the earlier attack as well as one in Lahore, saying that these were revenge basically for American missile strikes targeting militants in the Pakistani tribal areas near the Afghan border. And he had also said that there would be more attacks because these missile strikes had not stopped, in fact seemed to be increasing, and there was one that took place today as well.
Barbara Platt live in Islamabad, thanks very much.